This episode of the iTnews podcast is brought to you by Slack, the AI-powered platform for work that brings together your conversations, apps, and customers in the one place. To hear how AI can transform your organization, hang around to the end when Slack's technology evangelist shares his tips for boosting productivity, engagement, and transparency in your workplace.
Hello and welcome to the iTnews podcast. Our guest is Sherrie Killiby, Executive Director of Strategy and Engagement at Transport for New South Wales. Transport for New South Wales has created its first enterprise-wide technology strategy, incorporating not just customer and operational technology, but also IT for the first time. The strategy is a 10-plus year vision for technology and how it can help deliver more equitable, sustainable, and efficient travel and modes of transport for New South Wales, as well as a better experience for the agency's staff.
Am I correct in thinking the Future Transport Technology Roadmap was the last iteration of this strategy?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the Future Transport Technology Roadmap was a 5-year plan, but it only covered our customer and operational technology areas. So it was a real way of us showing what we were doing for customers and for our operational area, which of course impacts customers as well. So what we've done with this strategy, which is new, so we are calling it the first enterprise-wide technology strategy because it incorporates not just our customer and operational technology, but it also includes our information technology. So all of the internal technologies that we use to make the way that we work at transport much more efficient, much safer, much more resilient, which of course still benefits customers because of the output it provides. But what both strategies do is still talk to emerging technologies. And of course, we're really excited to always partner and work with industry to make sure that we're delivering the absolute best possible outcomes for our customers. And sometimes that's through testing and trialing to make sure that we learn and we work out how else might we do this? How might we be able to do this better? And that's, of course, what emerging technologies can also help us do.
So how was information technology previously treated within this kind of strategy conversation?
The information technology area had a really strong focus and a really strong strategy, but it was kept internal. And so it was really about working with our partners to say, what else do we need to make sure that we build the really right, robust systems within transport? But what we've recognised is we really want to be coordinated and much more enterprise and much more holistic in the way that we deliver services moving forward. And so we shouldn't have divisions between different types of areas and different types of technology, but actually understand the fuller landscape. And we know that by doing that, we can work much better together and even share and be more interoperable, because just because one system's used for internal purposes doesn't mean it can't be used for operational technology purposes or customer technology purposes. So it's really about trying to gain some efficiencies and, of course, some cost savings.
So you mentioned the previous strategy was on a 5-year horizon, I think, which differs to this one because this one you've got 3 different horizons set across, I think they are 2025, 2028, and then 2033 plus. So you're looking sort of 10 years and beyond as well.
Yeah, and I guess the reason is we can't set a technology strategy and say, of course, it's going to last and be exactly the same forever. So we absolutely say that this is a living and breathing document and a living and breathing direction for us. We also know that the strategic directions that the organisation sets and the whole of government directions that are set for us as well, we need to be able to be responsive to those. And that's what the strategy is all about. We know short term some things that we need to deliver, and then there's a medium term, but we also want to have our eye to the future because sometimes things in the future do need a lot of lead time for us to get there. The digital systems project is a great example of this. So there's a long lead time. It's a very complicated piece of work where we're taking away the physical signals that are on the rail network and putting all of the technology into the cab and back to base. And what it means is that trains can run faster and the chance of signal failure decreases. Nothing worse than when we hear about signal failure and that impacts the network. We know that we're going to be able to have a much more resilient network with these changes, and that'll happen over the next few years.
So I wanted to drill into a couple of specific areas. The first one I wanted to just talk about a little bit was that the new strategy talks about the digital by default approach. And we hadn't necessarily seen that specific language in the
Yes.
previous iteration. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about what that means from an agency perspective.
I'm so glad you brought this up because it has been a really big shift for us and something that we have been working on in the background before but never really talked about externally. And we think that this is where the really big opportunity is for technology to really be able to show the benefits of what it can do when you think about things in a different way. So transport builds lots of major infrastructure, of course, in their roads and rail networks and freight networks as well. And digital by default, the idea behind that is that when we're doing the very early planning, so this is years and years, again, which is why we have a long horizon in the strategy, when we're doing that very early planning is to actually say, could technology defer or replace or supplement some of that infrastructure build. So a great example might be needing a new road network or a new bridge or something to that effect in a particular area. If we were to build smart motorway or a smart infrastructure, would we still need 3 lanes of traffic? Could that actually be reduced to a 2-lane road? So that might mean we don't need property acquisition. It might mean we don't need quite the same cost of infrastructure build. So they're the types of things that we're talking about. Is there other ways using technology to help change the way that we're delivering that infrastructure? So it is not a green light to just say, just use tech, because tech is great and it'll solve all of your problems. But what it is to think strategically about what else is out there to be able to put into our infrastructure to make sure that we've got a longevity. It's the same for smart cities or smart precincts. So when we're building new areas, what technologies could we put into those spaces so that we've got the intelligence and data we need to be able to make informed decisions about how people might be moving around that space and moving around in more efficient ways. So they're just a couple of examples of how we want to think about how technology could be built in at all stages of a life cycle of major projects, not just at the end where it might be more expensive or harder to be able to achieve those same outcomes.
One of the other areas that's interesting to me, obviously, is the addition of the IT parts to this strategy. When you read through it, by far the biggest number of initiatives seem to be attached to sustainable enterprise systems, which is described in the back half of the strategy. And that seems to cover work around foundational systems. It covers AI, it covers process automation. And it's also mentioned a next generation regulatory operations system, a whole bunch of things. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit to that side of things and how that work might progress, because it seemed like most of those activities are stacked in the first horizon, for example.
So all of those things you mentioned are projects that are currently underway that we want to be able to get out there. The regulatory area, we know that there's some systems that haven't had a lot of love over the years. And that's very common across all sorts of areas, not just within transport, but across whole of government. And there's a real recognition that we need to make sure that we get the basics right and we fix some of those very core underlying systems. Like that system, for example, that is for licensing and registration, which just about every person or every household has a license of some sort. And so it's a really core system that we have. And so by making sure that we're coordinated and understanding what is the technology that's being used in that particular program, we can also think about, can we share those assets and reuse them or use somebody else's assets? So that's one key example. You also mentioned AI. And of course, AI can be used in multiple different ways, in multiple different use cases. But the case study that we're currently working on, and we have a trial out at the moment, is to use AI on street cleaners so that we're actually picking up footage of road networks, which we can put back into the system and use AI to help us look at the maintenance schedule that might need to be done. What is the quality of the road? Is it better or worse? The wonderful thing about this project is they used to do those scans every 3 to 5 years manually, and now they can collect data weekly. It's such a huge improvement in that data collection. And then the AI is self-learning, the machine learning obviously learns to then be able to even predict when they might need to do that maintenance on that road network. It's such a fantastic opportunity to really be able to show that not only can technology create safer outcomes, outcomes, but real cost efficiencies as well. Because, of course, if the roads are maintained in a better way or the priority areas are maintained in a better way, that's a much safer outcome for people using those road networks.
Just two things from that. The first thing is, and this is mentioned in the strategy, that from a foundational perspective, that it's envisioned that you'll use more state digital assets and common services. I don't know if you can give me any sense of what those are and what might be able to be leveraged within the agency. I'm not personally familiar with state digital assets, or if you can maybe define, are those like the shared data center assets or things that are in the state government data centers?
They can be anywhere. So
Okay.
the whole premise around state digital assets is being worked through right now. So yes, we're aware that some state digital assets exist. And the idea, of course, is that when you do need to go into procurement for a new technology type, that you actually assess it against what those state digital assets might be, about whether that might actually be a better outcome in your optioning for your business case. The cost of doing business is expensive, and the more that we can think about interoperability and scalability and reuse is going to be really critical for us moving forward. So that is happening, and it's happening right now. And there's a whole bunch of processes going on at the moment to understand what makes a digital asset, and then how do you then test and assure that, yes, that's going to meet your requirements before you move into that. So that is definitely happening within the space as well.
You mentioned AI as well, which I wanted to particularly ask about, because I thought a nice thing about the strategy was it really charts the course for AI. And it goes through from, I think, it describes AI around capability management in 2025 in the first horizon. And then it moves through to AI augmented workflows, and then hopefully in the future that a lot of people are talking about, which is like the personal virtual assistant. But I wondered if you might be able to just discuss how that kind of discussion is evolving, because I imagine that's something that would have come up a lot in any planning discussions.
Yeah, it does. That's right. And it's a really exciting area because there are lots of benefits to be able to improve processes. And again, like a lot of organisations, there are a lot of manual processes that we have to do in order to get our business done. And when we can bring in artificial intelligence to do some of those kind of routine pieces of work in a really simple way, that's a huge cost saving. But what it means is that we get to focus then on the things that matter, that we can add our intelligence into as well in terms of planning or developing programs of work. So there's lots of discussions going on. And of course, there's lots of discussions going on about how we govern it. We want to make sure that we do this in the most safe and secure ways. We need to make sure that we're not doing it for the sake of doing it. When there are new technologies, there's of course always a desire to just use it and see what happens. But we're really going back to basics, and we're really thinking about what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And we really do try and look at all of the options available to us. And sometimes that will be the best option, but that's not necessarily always the case. A bit like our digital by default policy, technology may not be the right solution, and that's okay if it's not. And so the strategy wants to be really clear about that it sets the direction of where we want to go, but it doesn't say you must.
So one other thing I wanted to ask about was, I think in the middle of the document, it talks to the transport priorities, which I assume, are they the cluster priorities, or are they just the Transport for New South Wales priorities?
We have our future transport priorities, which are the organisation's kind of North Star or the strategic direction of where we want to be. But of course, there's many reviews that are happening. And so they also become priority areas. And what's really great about those reviews is that it gives us the opportunity to say, we can use technology to help solve some of these problems in what's being presented as part of those reviews. So the tolling review obviously will have technology to help support those recommendations. The bus review, we're already working on some of those recommendations of how technology can support those. Again, the technology strategy doesn't set the direction of going, we're going to use technology in these areas. What it does is, what's the problems, or what are we trying to achieve as an organisation and as a government? And then we work towards trying to achieve those using technology in the best ways.
So one of the priorities that it lists is around the employee focus. So particularly it tries to look at creating a more rewarding work environment with technology, so that people can be more productive and they can work more quickly and easily. And there's a couple of associated suggestions around using potentially robots or drones in highly dangerous environments to limit personnel contact with that kind of situation. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you see technology impacting the employee experience within transport.
There's some really exciting opportunities here. You mentioned drones, and we are already using drones for asset maintenance. So we can get drones up really quickly into areas for bridge works, for example, to be able to see whether they need maintenance or what that maintenance might be, and be able to access that in far faster times than we've ever been done before. And that means it's safer for our workforce, and that's a really big plus. The other program that we're doing as part of the strategy is actually to uplift the technical capabilities of our people as well. That's really important. Technology is so pervasive now that we all need to be technology specialists because it impacts just about every piece of work that we do. There's always some sort of technology aspect. And we really want to be able to achieve that uplift in capability so that people do have the skills to be able to do things in a different way. You also mentioned about the way that they're working, and we want to use things like agile ways of working to change the way that we deliver as well, so that we can be iterative in our delivery, not deliver big chunks of work at the end of a very long period and then go, oh, did they work quite right? Not quite how we thought. But when it's an iterative process, we keep testing and learning to go, yes, we're on the right track. Or we deliver small amounts of work first in littler batches so that we don't have such huge hurdles to deliver. So there's quite a lot of different types of processes happening to try and enable that employee experience.
From a productivity or decision supports perspective, is there anything in train at the moment or that the agency currently has that's really enabling a real benefit or real value from an employee perspective?
There is a lot of work that's going on to make sure that we can improve the way that we collect data on the network. So we have situational awareness, and then how we analyse that data to put those decisions back in the network. And that's obviously critical. We want our network to always keep running and be at its peak operation. And without eyes on, and we can do that via drones, we do that via sensors, we do that via new technologies to be able to understand what is happening on the network and respond really quickly to those incidents, and then be able to plan accordingly of what might need to happen to correct the incident and keep people moving. It's a really significant part of this strategy as well, is making sure that we get the basics right as well as look to the future.
And I just want to finish maybe around that basics, right, and look to the future, because I think one of the big things that came out to me when I was reading this strategy was the outcomes focus. The previous one was very technology focused, but it didn't mention the word outcomes so many times, I don't think. But this one particularly is really driven around what is this going to create in terms of equitable travel, in terms of sustainable travel, in terms of efficient travel as well.
Yeah, look, you've delighted me with this question because that is exactly what we wanted to achieve. We sometimes get criticised for doing technology for technology's sake, and that is absolutely not the message that we'd like to put forward. The message that we want to put forward is that we want to make sure we get really great outcomes for our passengers and our customers and those that use the transport network. And we can only do that when we're coordinated, we have the same shared goal, and then we say, we think technology can help you do this by either option A or option B. And that's what's really exciting about the strategy, is that we know that technology is a major enabler alongside services and policy and infrastructure to delivering our transport vision for the future. And this technology strategy helps us step forward in being able to achieve that.
Welcome to this special IT News discussion with Slack, the AI-powered home of work platform to keep your teams connected and engaged. I'm Nate Cochran, contributing editor for IT News and your host today. Leading teams, whether you're face-to-face in the office or far away, separated by streets, suburbs, states, or even time zones, has never been more challenging. So joining us to unpack the topic around AI in the workplace is Slack's tech evangelist, Derek Laney. Welcome, Derek, to the IT News podcast.
G'day, Nate. Great to be with you.
There's a lot of hype around artificial intelligence, large language models and the like. How do you see these technologies playing out in the workplace?
Nate, I think a big part of this is, are we going to replace ourselves or are we going to augment ourselves to be something better than what we were before? And I'm very hopeful, and the evidence suggests that it's probably the latter that's going to be true in most of the cases. There's some key things that AI is doing for us when we think about human capabilities. AI can help leaders and team members synthesize large bodies of information faster. The ability to summarize is one of the first capabilities that's hit the market and started to be used actively now by our customers. It also surfaces potentially buried insights. There's people that have been using Slack for 10 years and have this huge institutional knowledge that they're now able to unlock by applying AI on top of it to surface up information. So synthesis of large bodies of information is a really good one. Maybe less obvious, though, as some of the other use cases. So AI is also becoming a creative thought partner. So a very common practice is to start using AI to generate multiple possible plans. So just think about, I've got to create a plan to get something done. Maybe it's bringing my team together to make a decision for our executives. Saying to the AI, build me 3 versions of this plan so that I can compare. That just jumpstarts my own thinking. I'm starting to use it to stimulate myself with examples. And then I'm more likely to come to something that makes sense for the business. But in this case, it's like used as a partner. A good example of this is McLeod Cranes. They use an artificial intelligence to generate blameless versions of health and safety reports. And then they use an artificial intelligence to generate a first pass of an action plan of what to do about it. That means they can do something that previously would have taken them 2 days in under a minute and have active steps being taken on a site to get people safe and to get the outcome that they need. The third is freeing up time for relationship building. Here's a data point in our research that just came out this month. We see Australians have a huge percentage of their day taken up by low-value tasks that AI could help with. This is about 47% of time spent on these kind of low-value tasks in a typical desk worker job. That's about 41% in our global average. Taking away some of these simple tasks is a really key place. A good example of that's customer service. There's a lot of kind of rote response that needs to go into serving customers. And then there's a huge amount of high value that's delivered by customer service reps. So using AI alongside customer service, great way to free up time for relationship building. And I think, though, human capital will continue to be valuable. The question is not so much how do we get rid of it, but which tasks will we redirect our scarce resources to? For example, we have an airline customer that's found automation to allow them to pull staff from their customer service center and put them into more strategic operations roles where they're thinking about creating change in the organization. They're 10xing their impact or 100xing their impact by working on an aggregate across a large set of information rather than just serving one individual customer. I think this idea of how do I 10x my impact and get some of those simple tasks done is a great way of thinking about the equation for human capital management.
But isn't there a massive temptation when building the AI business plan to cut people out of the loop to offset the investment cost?
It's not just about how do I take costs out. And I really think that AI shouldn't be viewed as this kind of cost-saving silver bullet where we just take people out of the loop. Do we do the same things that we did before and do them faster? I think that really won't prove out to be the winning strategy because we can always apply human capital to make things better. There was a study from MIT just recently that was looking at computer vision, just one part of AI. They looked at all of these different use cases and they found to replace those things wholesale is actually a lot further into the future than what we first thought. And I think we'll find that as we come into many different use cases. There will, however, be opportunities to do things in highly innovative ways. A good example of that is prompt engineering. Here's a tool that has so much power, but then you take a human creatively manipulating it, and suddenly you can unlock 10 times more effectiveness by just asking questions in different ways. And our customers will always require us to be accountable for what's happening. We're always going to need to have humans in the loop whenever there's some kind of high impact decision, because we're going to need to hold someone accountable. And we sure as heck can't hold an automated AI accountable.
So you mentioned prompt engineering then, and I find prompt engineering is often just a case of asking the same question repeatedly in slightly different ways until you get the answer you never knew you always wanted. But how can workers leverage AI, skill up for the AI revolution, and also maybe deal with a little bit of that very understandable anxiety they have that they may lose their jobs or their jobs may just simply go away?
There's a piece of research by a company called Pew Research that was looking at all job roles across an international job database. And they found that about now 80% of all job roles have at least 10% of the tasks that they do exposed to AI. They're not saying those things will be replaced, but they found that there's a small percentage, maybe 19% of jobs that have more than half their tasks exposed. So there are some jobs that are more impacted than others, but in a lot of cases, 80% of cases, this is really a small part of that work. And when we think about Slack's own research, that 47% of the work that we do is on low value tasks that actually we probably would rather do without. I think in a lot of cases, there's more opportunity for us to provide more value as human plus machine than there is in purely those automation only use cases.
So how are Australians responding to having AIs in their workplace?
29% of Australians are already using AI as of about 6 months ago. We just took a re-look at this number this month, and it's jumped from 1 in 5 to 1 in 4. That's a big leap in just 6 months. And Australians are already saving 3 to 4 hours per week in automation, according to our own research. So this has been going on for a long while until it's starting to take parts of our job and finding new ways that we can add value. And I think that's the shape of how things are likely to continue.
So for our listeners who either want to get started or level up their use of AI to be more productive and valuable in their businesses and also to help their teams achieve their goals, how do they get started with AI on Slack?
Well, I think the first thing is putting tools in their hands that they can use, from simple things that you don't have to be a prompt engineer to use. A good example of that is simple things like catch me up faster. Rather than having to read everything that's been going on with a project, just give me a summary of what happened so that I can get up to speed faster and start to take action. A second example would be just using AI search. I can start asking natural language questions, and the AI will go and search through the system just like we would have searched in the past. But instead of scrolling through 3 pages of results looking for the needle in the haystack, the AI will read that for us and then synthesize the answer to the question. It feels like magic when you start using it for the first time, but it's just doing things that we were doing before much, much faster. The next generation of tools then becomes more like our interactive assistants. And that's where things like Einstein Copilot inside Slack enable us to ask natural questions of all of our data and ask for reasoning. And I think this is the environment where more experimentation is needed, because it's what's the use cases where this is going to provide real value in the past, where maybe we'd have gone to a data analyst and it would have been a 3-month process. Instead, we're just going to ask a real-time question and see the result.
So for someone who wants to test out these AI tools for themselves, how do they onboard with Slack?
You can sign up for Slack at slack.com. Our enterprise products now have the AI available as of last month. So have a talk to us about getting that live if you have Slack already. And you can use this across the data that you've already maintained over the years of usage that you've had.
That was Derek Laney, Slack technology evangelist, speaking on the power of AI to solve complex business problems simply. And if you want to learn more about how to lead and inspire your teams, check out our other Slack podcasts with iTnews. Our first pod helps leaders seeking to inspire their teams, whether they're face-to-face or far away. It's chock full of handy tips to boost productivity while cutting outmoded ways to work. And if you ever wondered what a simple messaging platform could possibly do for you, you're not alone. Listen in as Scott McLeod explains how his crane company built its own AI safety officers in Slack, all without any knowledge of coding or complex AI systems. It's a case study in the art of the possible for anyone who needs answers to questions they don't yet know they have. Just head to itnews.com.au and click on the podcast tab at the top for these and other fresh tech and business insights. I'm Nate Cochran. Thanks for listening.